Connie's family has come out and said that they don't like the fact that the media started calling this the Fitbit murder, because it's not about a Fitbit. This case is about a mother who was murdered horrifically. From the beginning, investigators had a strong sense that the person responsible for her murder was her own husband. So as he's sitting there describing his attacker to police, he says that this person was very large, 6'2", bulky, and sounded like Vin Diesel. Yeah, Vin Diesel, actor Vin Diesel. Fast and Furious Vin Diesel. And he wasn't able to provide too much information about what this person looked like other than their build and their height, because they were wearing camouflage, a mask, and gloves. Then Rick tells investigators that he witnessed this person shoot his wife in the basement. And Connie's body was found in the boiler room of their basement. And Rick said that he had no idea she was dead until he heard detectives say that the body was DOA. Investigators had a lot of clarifying questions, and they were already starting to see Rick's story change. Detectives even told Rick that everything he had been saying since they got to the hospital didn't match up with the crime scene, and they were basically skeptical of everything he said. And you know what his initial response was? He said, Okay, that's it. And then he went on to describe in detail the affair that he had been having. Rick explains that he and Connie wanted to have a third child together, but due to health reasons, Connie was unable to get pregnant. And after several failed attempts, the two of them came up with an alternative idea. Rick then explained that he had an old friend from high school who had recently gotten divorced, but was wanting to have a baby of her own. Now, I'm going to give this woman a different name for the sake of protecting her identity, although I know her name is out there, so if you really try, you can find it. I'm going to be calling her Hannah. So Rick says that the three of them, Hannah, Connie, and Rick, as a group, decide that they are going to use Rick's to get Hannah pregnant. But Rick tells investigators that the process was too expensive. So the three of them decide together that they're going to do this the old-fashioned way, and that Connie is completely fine with all of this. And not just completely fine, he explains that in a way the whole thing was her idea, and that the three of them would be co-parenting this baby. And several people said that there is absolutely no way in hell that Connie would have been okay with him having a baby with another woman, that is just completely out of the question. To their knowledge, Connie had no idea that this was even happening. Her closest friends, who she confided everything in, believed that Connie would have told them if she had ever found out that her husband was cheating on her. Rick's friends and family were also interviewed, of course, and it became clear that some people did in fact know he was cheating on his wife and that he got another woman pregnant. One friend said that Rick told him about the affair and the pregnancy and how much he loved Hannah, but that he was afraid his wife would leave him. In the end, he admits that he had been cheating on Connie with Hannah for several years, and that the pregnancy was not planned, it was unexpected. Obviously, to better corroborate his story, detectives track down Hannah and ask her for a statement. And this is a written statement, and Hannah said that their romantic relationship first started in spring of 2015, and even though she did know he was married, she was under the impression that he and Connie were getting a divorce. And of course, she was under that impression because that's what Rick told her. He said that they had both been unhappy for years, and it was a mutual divorce. There was no pending divorce. And on January 11th, 2016, detectives reached out to Protective Life Insurance Company about the two policies the debates had. And that's when they learned that each of them had a policy for $475,000, and the other was listed as the beneficiary. And although Rick's policy was canceled back in 2012 for lack of payment, Connie's policy was still active. And of course, what do you know, only 5 days after her murder, Rick made a claim on her policy and was looking to cash in on $500,000. Detectives executed several search warrants, including the records of Hannah and Rick's phones, the records for the home security system, Rick's Microsoft tablet, and most importantly, the records from Connie's Fitbit. And ultimately, it was information from these records that proved who the killer actually was. And once again, detectives could see what a liar this man was, because he was texting his wife, "I love you," and at the same time texting Hannah, "I love you." And Rick's final text to Hannah was the night before he murdered his wife. And he wrote, "I'll see you tomorrow, my little love nugget." So now I'm going to talk about the records that were really the nail in Rick's coffin. At 8:44 on December 23rd at their residence, one of the garage doors registers as opening and closing, which is consistent with the time that Connie left for the YMCA and her spin class. This is confirmed shortly after because Connie can be seen arriving at the Y on surveillance video at 8:53 a.m. and her Fitbit begins registering movement, indicating that she was walking into the building. Minutes before, at 8:50, Rick is using his login to disarm the whole security system, including all of the motion sensors in the home. Then, within the same minute, he rearms the system along with the motion sensors and gets a text confirming that the alarms are on. This would suggest that he is leaving for work. 9 minutes later, at 8:59 a.m., Rick disarms the security system and uses his key fob to do so. Now, this fob can only be effective if it's in within 500 feet of the home, meaning that Rick had to be home or at least very close to home by 9 a.m. And this would suggest that Rick was returning home to check out why the alarm had been activated. And that would mean that this 9-minute window would be when the intruder would have entered the home. But not only did the alarm system not indicate an intruder, it didn't indicate motion in the house at all. And if that weren't suspicious enough, what you're about to hear definitely is. At 9:02 a.m., data from Rick's tablet confirms that he was at home and using the internet because the IP address shows that he was signed into his Outlook account from 7 Birchview Drive. At 9:04 a.m., the same tablet records indicate that Rick sent an email to his supervisor from the IP address at 7 Birchview Drive. Rick told detectives that he pulled his car over before returning home to send this email. And he also said the same thing in the email, that he pulled over to let them know that he was on his way home, not that he was already home. Plus, Rick said the whole attack lasted 5 minutes. If the alarms indicate that he returned at 9 a.m. and he sent the email at 9:04 a.m., that would mean that the entire attack would have to have taken place in 1 minute, which is just not possible. When Connie got to the Y, she actually only stayed for a few minutes because her class ended up being canceled, and her Fitbit shows no movement for 8 minutes starting at 9:08 a.m., which is when she was driving home. And Rick was adamant that his wife was shot almost immediately when returning home, but her Fitbit shows that she moved a total distance of 1,217 feet inside her home between 9:18 and 10:05 a.m. Even her Facebook records indicated that she was online and active for 6 minutes during this time as well. Her last registered movement wasn't until 10:17 a.m., just 17 minutes before 911 was called. And this is believed to be her true time of death. And something small but important that I read in the arrest affidavit was that Rick canceled his contract to have the home security system only 12 days after Connie was killed. If an intruder really did just come into your house 12 days earlier and killed your wife and was still on the loose, and you have 2 small kids, why would you do this? It makes no sense. And speaking of the kids, it is just heartbreaking thinking of the pain and suffering that they have had to go through all of this. They've been put in the care of another family member, and my heart just breaks for them. But even as investigators were uncovering all of this incriminating information, the public still had no idea at this point who Connie's killer was. And it actually wasn't until April 14th, 2017, when Rick was arrested, that everyone learned the truth. Richard DeBate was arrested and charged with murder, tampering with evidence, and making a false statement.
Prosecutors say DeBate staged the home invasion. And as for a motive, they believe he had affairs and was concerned about the consequences of a potential divorce.
And even though you probably think that this case is pretty straightforward and so the trial would be, it actually took 5 years to get a conviction. And as the years went by, the media attention on this case got bigger and bigger. And the fact that Connie's Fitbit was a major piece of evidence was something that the public really latched onto. Obviously now the use of personal health trackers is only getting bigger. And I do want to mention that Connie's family has come out and said that they don't like the fact that the media started calling this the Fitbit murder, because it's not about a Fitbit. This case is about a mother who was murdered horrifically by her husband. And yes, the Fitbit played a big role and shouldn't be ignored, but it's important to note that Connie's memory and legacy is what's remembered at the end of the day. Throughout April of 2022, Rick DeBate sat on trial for the murder of his wife, as well as tampering with evidence and making a false statement. The trial went on for almost a month, and it wasn't necessarily smooth sailing for the prosecution. The defense brought forward some undeniable information that the jury just couldn't ignore. It turns out that there was unidentified DNA found in 6 places in the home, and the location of the DNA matched the story of someone being in the closet and making their way down to the basement. They also noted that there was an insignificant amount of gunshot residue found on Rick. He did test positive for GSR particles. However, you would expect this to be more significant if he had been the one to pull the trigger. But the prosecution was able to say that the gunshot residue test wasn't administered until hours after he'd been brought to the hospital, and it's possible his hands had been wiped during that time. The prosecution also drilled him about the whole Vin Diesel thing. After 22 days, it took the jury only 3 hours to come back with a guilty verdict. And Connie's mom spoke publicly about what a relief this verdict was for their family. She even publicly talked about the conversation that she had with her daughter the morning she was killed. But despite the guilty verdict, Rick maintains that he is innocent. He even told the judge during the sentencing that he is a victim of those who seek victory over truth. But in the end, Rick, or Richard DeBate, was sentenced to 65 years in prison. Of course, he and his lawyers say that this is just the beginning and they're going to fight for his freedom. But we will see about that. But this is just such a sad case, especially knowing how loved Connie was. She deserved so much more in life than she got. And for Rick to have stolen her from her friends and family and her children is just horrible.